All right, everybody, welcome to our conversation this evening. Very happy you are all here. It's great to see all of your faces in the new year. Had a chance to see some of you at Sharon's opening, so welcome back and welcome, Sharon. You're in my upper left-hand corner of my screen. Can everybody see and hear Sharon? Sharon, give everybody a hello, just to make sure
Hi,
you're good.
hi, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Fabulous. And thanks for everybody for being here. This is our first talk of the new year, 2024. I'm super excited you're all here with us this evening. Couple of bits of housekeeping. As I mentioned, we're going to be recording. Feel free to keep your video on or off. It's totally up to you. We will be reserving a solid at least 15 minutes, or probably 20 minutes at the end of our conversation this evening for Q&A. So if you have questions along the way, please hold them, kind of put a bookmark in them, and there will be plenty of time to ask Sharon questions at the end of tonight's conversation. Now, feel free to update your screen names to whatever you feel most comfortable. You could put up your gender pronouns as well if you're comfortable doing that. I just want to make sure we are as inclusive and equitable as humanly possible in this forum. And again, we're going to leave plenty of time at the end of our conversation for Q&A. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Matthew, delegate. I run Minus Space. I'm really honored you're all here and have been part of this project for the last 20 years. We're pushing 21 years at this point. We turned the corner. Many of you saw the 20th anniversary show we did over the summer. Some of you were in it, and it's just a real honor to be able to just do this in a way that is sustainable and completely uncompromised. So I don't take that for granted, especially these days. So really, really, really excited to do this. Now we're here this evening, obviously, to talk about Sharon's brand new exhibition, Change and Recurrence. Now this is Sharon's third solo show with us. Many three-person and group shows and projects that we've been involved in together, Sharon, since the very inception of this project 20 years ago. So Sharon, you are a lifer, along with Lynn Harlow, who just yellow screened it there. But, we're like Hotel California. You can't really check out once you're in. You stick around, which is great. And it's just great to be able to present the work again at our space. Now, Sharon, for those of you that don't know her, I think most of you do, but this is, again, a recording for those that can't be here this evening. She has exhibited her work internationally for the past 5 decades. Shows have included Europe, Australia, Mexico, and the United States. She organized a previous solo show with us called Plenty in 2018, and one before that, Sideswiped, in 2012. She was, of course, also included in our recent summer show, 20, which surveyed our 20th anniversary, as well as Subvert City, organized by Vincent Como, a 3-person show alongside our last artist, Michael Brennan and John Zinzer, as well as, shows we've organized in Mexico and at MoMA PS1 over many years. Now, Sharon has exhibited her work at many institutions, including the Whitney Museum of Art, Rochester Museum, Everson Museum of Art, and the Aldrich Contemporary Art Museum, among so many others. So lots and lots of museum activities. Now, Sharon studied at the Kansas City Art Institute in Missouri from 1962 to 1965 and made a quick dash for New York City 1 year after that. And you've been in and around New York City since 1966. Your work was included, Sharon, a couple of years later in the Whitney Museum's annual painting show in 1972. You regularly exhibited with O.K. Harris in the early 1970s, AIR in the 80s and 90s, and Elizabeth Moore in the 2000s, as well as with us. One of the things I'd like to especially highlight is that Sharon was one of the founding members of an artist-run exhibition and meeting space called Museum in 1968, which was located at 729 Broadway in the city. It was intended as a politically progressive community center for artists with the goal of supporting, quote, a more alive connection between art and society without the dissipation of force and quality occurring so frequently in the current art establishment. circa 1968. The membership of museum grew to more than 300 people before it closed in 1971. So I'm, as you probably can imagine, I'm a huge fan of anyone that starts initiatives on behalf of the arts, on behalf of artists, on behalf of the arts community, on behalf of like realizing a better potential for all of us. I just feel like this is such a great thing, Sharon. So congratulations on Museum, even though it was, so many years ago. You were a member of AIR Gallery from 89 to 96, which was the first artist-run gallery for women in the United States, founded in 1972. They're our neighbor in Dumbo, Brooklyn. I know all of you have been there, and they are as active as ever. You've been part of American Abstract Artists since 2004. Great organization for those of you that don't know it, founded in 1936 to champion abstraction in the United States. You received an Gottlieb Foundation Award in 2012, and your work has been reviewed and talked about and discussed widely, excuse me, from Art Forum to Art News to the New York Times, Hyperallergic, among many, 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 many other publications. So welcome, Sharon. So happy you are here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's so much fun to be doing this Zoom, and I just want to thank everyone for being here. It's really great.
It's really a privilege, right, for us to convene from, all over the country and around the globe. It's just really super fantastic. So we're going to talk for a minute. It's going to go really quickly, of course. And again, if there's questions along the way, just hold them. But, Sharon, I think maybe the best place to start for our conversation is the title of your show, which is very different than Sideswiped and Plenty previously. Now, this show is called Change and Recurrence, and you were very clear on this title. Like, I want the show titled this, and I'm like, okay, great. Where is Change and Recurrence from? What does it mean to you? How did you get there?
Well, I recently I was reading some of this book, which I've had for forever, by John Berger. It's called The Sense of Sight, and it's full of writings on art and on artists. Bonnard. Um, and one thing I was reading at the time I got this idea was it was called Painting and Time. And John Berger mentioned this phrase. He mentioned change and recurrence. And it immediately caught my eye because it's something I've been thinking about for a long time, that my work is always changing. I feel like it's always changing. But for some reason, it keeps coming back around to some very similar things. And that's over decades. It keeps doing this. And so I thought it was really very pertinent to having this show, because there's a lot of reassembling, I think, that I'm doing, especially in this show.
Fantastic. So what are some of those core things that you keep returning back to?
Well, one thing I've been working with um, since the 60s, really, was that I've always wanted line in my paintings. I also like tension. I like to have tension in my work, in the paintings. And I've never been a great fan of just having a mass of color. I've always been interested in incorporating line in some way. And it sort of would always come back haunting me. There's always this tendency to want to draw almost more than what you might call painting. But and I think it's so obvious, of course, in this show, where the upper part of the painting is so linear, but then you have this mass of color on the bottom. And I almost feel like with these paintings, they came very close to being a monochrome painter, really. and there are some monochrome pieces, actually.
So you're sort of approaching, but not at the status in these works of monochromes, right? So they've got this very large sort of section at the bottom.
Because I like duality, and
Mhm,
also I consider that a way of getting tension in the painting.
mhm,
So yeah, it's not enough for me to just do the color. And
mhm,
I think there are enough painters doing that I don't need to be doing it. I always need to find my own way.
mhm, mhm. Now, for those of you that haven't seen the exhibition, I can easily pull up images if it would be helpful to see the paintings, to see the show. So just let me know, Sharon, if that's what we want to do here. But how did you make these paintings? It's a question. So there's clearly a concern with regarding color. There is a form, there is a shape, and no two shapes, I think, in this show repeat themselves. There's a couple of squares, a couple of horizontals, a couple of vertical rectangles. But walk us through the process of how you arrived at this sort of combination of elements, this sort of linear work above, floating over or pushing down on, in some cases, this large single color that is smooth, polished, in contrast to kind of the more gestural linear marks that are above it. So how did you arrive at this form?
Well, it's kind of a combination of the past two solo shows I've had at Minus Space. Uh, there's there was a body of work between the last exhibition I had and this exhibition, which I haven't shown at Minus Space, and that's the one you have in your window, Matthew, the yellow one. I did a whole body of work of paintings that I've had in a couple of group shows elsewhere. But so this show is kind of a combination of the grid paintings. Those were grid paintings. There was a grid, there was an overallness of color, but there was also a grid drawn on linen and on the color. And that was not shown at Minus Space. But it was a continuation, you might say, of the last show I had at Minus Space, which was more of an overall color with the linen framing the color, but no grid.
Mhm,
And so after doing the grid paintings, I started reading. I've always loved Al Jensen's work. So I got out all of the Al Jensen books I had and I read them all again. And I think his painterliness, because he did use very thick paint directly out of the tube, was something that really appealed to me. You might say again, you know, because painting this long, I've done a lot of things that have never been shown. So using impasto isn't completely new to me. I've used it before in previous works, way back in the past. But so I think that is what got me interested in the what I started doing across the top of these paintings. And I wanted to keep the color. And in fact, I wanted to become even more colorful. So that's what I've done in these paintings, except I didn't want to paint like Al Jensen, and I had to find a way of painting. I like to paint with a palette knife, and actually I did that in that last show I had with you, Matthew. Even though they're a very smooth surface, the I it's done with a palette knife. So these are done with a palette knife finally, not all of them, but the more recent ones are done with the palette knife. I started using the oil stick across the top. Um, I don't know if you have anything you can show.
Sure.
Would have the oil stick across the top just to see the difference. So that's how these got started, was this flat color that's almost like just a monochrome painting, but then having something more exuberant across the top.
I don't know if this is helpful, everybody, if
Uh,
you can see this.
no, because none of these are oil stick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are sort of the more impastoed. These are
Yeah,
sort of images of the impastoed sort of top parts of these.
yeah, these are later. These are later. Do you have a painting that might have oil stick on the top?
You know, it's totally possible. Please continue though, while I hunt it down. Mhm.
Okay. So anyway, that's how they started off, with the oil stick across the top and acrylic on the bottom as the big monochrome area. But I do paintings one at a time. So each of these paintings was, or I should say, is always an experiment. There's something I'm trying to do in each one, but they start changing. Each one is a little bit different because each painting gives me another idea. What if I do this? What if I do that, kind of thing. So, see, initially, before I even did these as paintings, I was doing painting collages on heavy watercolor paper before I even started doing anything about these on canvas. Um, but once I started working on canvas, then I wanted the paint to get the paint across the top to become more and more physical. So you can always tell which are the earlier paintings. They'll have the oil stick across the top. And as time goes on, in the later paintings, I switched over to alkyd and using the palette knife. So you can tell that those are the later paintings. The more exuberant the paint across the top, the later the painting.
And why the change to alkyd as opposed to oil, Sharon? Like what was the rationale for that?
Well, first of all, the oil stick wasn't enough. Was compared to these paintings that you're looking at right now on the screen. The oil stick is flat. Everything is relative. So first you start using something, you think, oh yeah, this is really great. It does this, it does that, it's perfect. But you, as an artist, you get used to something after a while, and it's not enough. It's not good enough. And you start getting other ideas. Or maybe I should say ideas just come, because I really believe that sometimes things are being transmitted to me. I don't know where they come from. For example, the color that I start out with, I have to see the color inwardly before I can use it. So it's not like I can just choose a color. Um, so a lot of this is just suggested to me. I'm not sure where it comes from. It's as if I receive, particularly the color I receive. I just receive it. So, so once I felt the oil stick was too flat and too tame and really uninteresting compared to what I could do with a palette knife, then there's no way I was going to go back to it. So the alkyd is oil paint. The alkyd is a fast drying oil paint. A lot of people don't know what alkyd is, but it's oil paint. And I love working with oil paint. So I'm really happy to be working with it.
Mhm.
Uh, it was developed so that it wouldn't, a lot of people are allergic to oil paint. So it's for people that aren't allergic, or let's say they want to work faster. They don't want to wait a week or two for something to dry before they go on with the painting. With the alkyd, uh, these paintings can, this can be dry in 24 to 48 hours easily. And you can paint on top of it. You could keep working with it. You can apply the paint again over the top, and there's a lot of reworking in the paintings. So it's exactly like working with oil paint, which I love to work with, actually. I love to work with oil paint if I can.
So just to go back to this image very quickly, if you can see this one, Sharon, it's the last work in your show. So in the alkyd enabled you to kind of go into that energy
Oh,
line, the network of lines at top, and kind of work that and rework it as you
so,
need it more
well,
quickly.
so you're talking about the gray painting.
Oh, sure, I can pull that one up if you need.
The gray painting is the last painting I did of everything in the show. And it's only 8 inches by 8 inches.
This one. Mhm.
That little gray one on the upper left, yeah.
Can everyone see that okay? Yes? Great. So this was the last painting in the show.
That's the last painting in the show.
Mhm.
That's different because I also had this desire to bring the top portion down more, to become more part of the painting. So I've been looking for a way for that to happen. And this was my first attempt to take that and just bring it down, elongate it. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next painting after this, because that's the direction I'm going in right now.
Mhm.
So
Could we
if you look at the proportion, that top part is much taller than all the others in relation to the bottom,
then say that one, right?
the gray one,
Yeah.
up little gray one on the top. Yeah.
Yeah. So could we circle back to something you said earlier, which is you are making these works, and I think it's important because it's how we approach the installation of the show. But you mentioned, and I just want to stress this because I feel like it's critical to understand, you make these works one at a time,
Right.
meaning that they're not predetermined. You don't have a big wall set up with all these canvases of the same size and the same shape, and they're not drawn out in a sketchbook or on paper, but you are standing, from what I understand and what I've seen in your studio, in front of a single stretcher. Maybe there's two on the one painting wall, but you're working on one at a time, and you are working on solving that problem and being kind of present in front of it.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that process? Like, why one at a time? What is the benefit of that? How does it shape the next work, or how do you use the previous work to sort of inform the next work? What's that like, Sharon?
Well, as you know, I meditate, and I've been meditating since 1989. And I think possibly, I'm just guessing, maybe that influences my focus and makes me want to focus on one thing at a time. I might have a big painting that I'm working on, one of the bigger paintings, and then I might do one of these small ones on my work table, on my drawing table. So it's possible I'd have two, but mostly I like to focus completely on one because, as I said, I feel like I receive information about the painting. And so I need to focus on just that. Um, I actually hear suggestions that sort of come to me about the painting. And, so part of the decision making is me, but occasionally um, I feel I receive verbally what I need to do in a painting.
Mhm.
And that only happens if I've been working on the painting for a while. It doesn't usually happen early on in the painting. It usually happens as the painting progresses. And it might be, in the beginning, it might be a real mess. It's not orderly, and it gets changed as I work on it. And it's kind of messy. And I never can seem to get everything exactly where I want it in the beginning. But as I continue to work, I change, and that is mostly with the top part. I do the bottom part first, and then I cover it up, and I go up to the top, and I just work on the top section. And that's the part that's a real mess. And that's where I start kind of, as time goes on, it's almost like I'm having a relationship with the painting. And it's only a relationship that develops over time. It's not initially a very good relationship because it's just not very much fun to start the painting. It's at the very beginning. But as time goes on, then the relationship comes in, and it has more body to it, and it has more going on. And that's when it gets really interesting for me. And I look forward to receiving what I'm going to receive from the painting. So I think that's why I do one or two paintings at a time.
Mhm.
I don't think I would have that experience of the painting if I put up a lot of canvases and tried to do a little bit here and a little bit there from canvas to canvas. That would be a whole different relationship.
Mhm. During our last studio visit in preparation for the show, Sharon, we were talking quite a bit about Frank Stella's black paintings.
Hmm.
And I think there's not a big enough contrast between the way those works were made, which was literally filling, I mean, as far as I understand them, literally like mapping out and filling in space very mechanically until the surface was covered, versus what you are describing, which is this kind of like channeling, intuiting, feeling relationship way of filling up that
Yeah,
top that top like margin of the composition, right?
yeah. Well, he had it all mapped out pretty much. I don't know what his process was exactly, but with these paintings, they change. So I'm never quite sure what I'm going to end up with.
Mhm.
So the whole process is different. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and you've described that top section like multiple times to me as hovering, kind of a hovering energy, which
Yes.
I like a lot. You don't describe it as lines per se. You haven't described it as the drawing, even though this is sort of the implied drawing section of the painting. And you've definitely not ever described it as a pattern of some kind. There's like no,
No.
never uttered those words.
No.
Can you describe that energy? Is the energy the part of that channeling that you're feeling? Is that how you're thinking of it?
I don't know. I don't
Mhm.
know about that, but I know that that is the part I really enjoy painting, is the top part. And the more I'm personally involved in painting it physically, the more physical it becomes, the more fun I'm having with it. And the more I think if you when you see if you can be in the gallery and see the exhibition, you'll see that some of these, like the orange lines over here on this green and orange painting on the left side, uh, it's compared to what's going on with this black and white painting is very subdued. That orange one is very subdued. So that's an earlier painting. So at this point, the top is getting um, more destroyed and as sort of fragmented as possible. So there's a pink painting in the show that I don't have a close-up of it, but
The small one or a big one, Sharon?
it's the small
Yeah.
one back in the corner behind your head right now.
There you have it.
But but
My
that
head blocked.
is really falling apart. That was disintegrating quite a lot. And so it is so much fun to do this in the paintings that I've been pushing it as far as I can. I don't know where it's going to go, but I love the whole feeling of. I do think it's energy that I'm uh, enjoying the energy of it, but visually, it's also getting fragmented. Yeah, and and I feel more energy with that as I do
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you practice meditation and you have been for the last 40 years. And I think there's probably a wide variety of interpretations of what that might mean, even within this Zoom conversation. But when you say you practice meditation, what does that mean exactly? I know what it means, but enlighten us. Yeah. How do you practice
It's a
meditation?
practice. Painting is a practice, drawing is a practice, and meditating is a practice. It means that you do it.
Mhm.
That's what practice means. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, I was going to mention that Balthus said that he would never think of going into the studio before meditating first. And I know that feeling because when I do that, the work goes much better and I do much better work. If I don't always have the discipline to meditate before I go in the studio, because I live and work in basically I live in such a small place that I'm right in my studio all the time. So sometimes I just walk in the studio and that's it. But I do notice that when I meditate before um, painting, uh, it it goes much better. Painting goes much better.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that about Balthus. I never thought of him as a meditator, but he was a great meditator. And he said he would never think of going in the studio before he meditated. I
So
thought that was interesting.
yeah, I didn't know that about him. Very interesting. I never would have, I guess, wouldn't have imagined it from the work that was made.
From those erotic paintings, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are we meditating on? I guess is the question. Yes. But interesting to know that. So there's a meditation component that is physically done before you're ideally entering the space of the studio. I know that you're also meditating, in independently or in addition to doing like studio work as well. You're practicing regularly. Yes.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Great. Excellent. Very, very good. Before we started, we were sort of doing a little bit of sort of a sound check, and I just felt it interesting to bring this up. But Sharon, again, take us back to 1966 when you arrived in New York City. Just a bit of a change of gears. What did you arrive into? Where were you? What was happening? You mentioned there was a much smaller art world at the moment, but we rarely have a chance to talk about those days. We're always talking about these days. What was it like for you moving from St. Louis to New York in the mid to late 1960s?
I moved from Kansas City.
Mhm.
I was still in Kansas City because I'd been in the Kansas City Art Institute. And I completed 3 years there. Um, I was married to Gary Smith at the time, and we had a toddler, um, a baby really, when we moved to New York City. We had $300 and we had a car that we loaded up and drove from Kansas City to New York City and stayed with Ross Coates and his family in Brooklyn. He was one of my teachers from Kansas City. He had been out teaching at Kansas City for a year. And we stayed with them for a week, and through the Village Voice found an apartment right across the street from Katz's Delicatessen, 6-room apartment for $85. So we moved into that with what money we had. And I got a job doing key punching for $50 a week. And my husband took care of our baby until he was old enough to go to day school when they're about 3 years old. And that's how we lived for a while. And we had, of course, we got rid of the car because you don't want that in New York City when you don't have any money.
Mhm.
And uh, one of the most delightful periods of my life actually was coming home, and my husband would meet me at the subway with our baby boy, and we would walk with the baby in the stroller from First Avenue, First Street, Houston, right on Houston, across from Katz's Delicatessen, walked all the way down to Chambers Street, where Ken Jacobs and his wife lived. And Ken is a very well-known underground filmmaker. And they had a loft, and we would go there many, many evenings and watch his films. He would put his films on. He would, it was, it was just fantastic. Such a fantastic thing. My husband, Gary Smith, was into filmmaking at that time. So that's how we got to know Ken and his wife, Flo.
Fantastic. And you were mentioning earlier too that the art world, no surprise here, was much smaller at
Well,
the time. Yes.
came along just a little bit later. So after about a year living there, we were handed this loft on Pitt Street. And that's when I really started painting. It was 100-foot long loft for $100 a month. And someone that my husband knew was leaving town, and he said, here, if the landlord likes you, you can move in. We didn't have to pay for it or anything. So we just kept paying the rent on it. And we were there for a couple of years. And that's actually when my work opened up completely. And by being in that big space, which was then a loft space, where you could put canvas on the floor, on the wall, you could have a studio separate from the living space. That's when my work really opened up. And that's when I started doing big paintings, 8 feet by 8 feet and bigger. And that's when I was able to create a body of work that we took pictures of. And instead of taking slides, um, my husband had the idea. He said, why don't you just make black and whites out of these, because you don't have much color in them anyway. I wasn't using much color, and I was using materials, and the color of the materials was what I painted with on the canvases. I also did a lot of Roplex, pouring of Roplex, and I went immediately over to OK Harris that had just opened up, and showed because he was only showing abstract work when he opened up, big abstract paintings. So I took this portfolio of these completely abstract, just having to do with materials, uh, works, which he loved immediately. And that's how I got started showing for a few years at OK Harris.
Mhm.
I had
And
two solo shows there.
yeah, in
In
the very, very beginning of the 1970s, right?
Not one was 1970, one was 1972. And so between the time we first moved in to New York City and that period was also when we founded a museum. It was really called Museum, a Project for Living Artists. And we started it because there was no place to show. If you weren't connected in some way, there was no place to show. Everything was on 57th Street. And it was only because you knew someone that was in the gallery, you might get in the gallery too. So that was so that people like us could get shown. So that happened just about the same time that I went with OK Harris, because it was also starting to open up in Soho, coincidentally. I mean, it was all kind of happening all at once we got to New York City.
Mhm.
And yes, I was saying at that point, you would go out, and there were only a couple of galleries at that point. Ivan's was the second show, I mean, gallery that opened in Soho. First, I think, was what's her name on Prince Street? I,
Was this Paula Cooper?
that's right.
Mhm.
Paula Cooper, and then Ivan, and then, it's like mushrooms popping up. Then everybody then started moving in down there. Yeah,
And where was museum? Where was that located, the space?
right on Broadway, just a
Mhm.
little ways up from Houston.
Interesting. Great, great.
Yeah, just a
Well,
few
thank
blocks up.
Yeah, it's so interesting just to hear like the early beginning, the seating, the moving, the getting settled, the new body of work, the space, and what that, facilitated for you. It's so interesting to hear that. Um, and a very different world at that time, of course, as well.
And
Yeah.
as I was going to say, everyone knew everyone else.
Yeah.
You went out, and immediately you knew who was showing, and everyone knew everyone. It's like a small town.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I love that about the world back then, which is great.
not like it is now.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sharon. I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and I promised everyone that we would leave plenty of time for questions. I'm sure there are many. We barely hit the tip of the iceberg here. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to just unshare my screen and get us back to sort of a grid view so we can see each other. And if you have questions, feel free to raise a hand or unmute yourself. It doesn't need to be a question. It could be a comment, an observation, a story that you want to share, an anecdote, something that's related to our conversation at hand. And I will let you guys take it from here. See, Pat's turned on the video. Chris Giannakos, question for you. Barbara, do you remember this art world that Sharon is talking about? Mark Williams, you're in Soho as well.
Yeah, a little bit late. This is Barbara, a little bit later for me, more like 72. I moved to Soho in 70, and I was making work, but Sharon is right. It was like a small town. You ran into the same people in the galleries, on the streets, at the supermarket. There's only one supermarket, at the dentist. It was a small, friendly place.
Mhm.
And there were a lot of little galleries, maybe some of the mushrooms Sharon's talking about, a lot of little galleries, Frank Marino, Bucher and Harpsichords, 55 Mercer, a lot of smaller galleries until the time that 420 opened up on West Broadway. And that was the beginning of the change into what the art world is now, I think.
It was Ivan Karp and 100 Acres.
What she said, Ivan Carr.
Yeah, 100 Acres.
That was across the street. Yeah, 100 Acres is across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the big thing about that period was that everybody was just working away. There wasn't this hypocritical criticisms and going on. There were, writers like Bill Zimmer.
Yes. Mhm.
People were writing, pretty good stuff in those days. I mean, it's a totally different feeling than it is now.
Yeah.
That's what we can really say.
It was
Totally different. It's a
it was
different world, a different species.
Mhm.
And different work,
Yeah.
very different work being shown.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate the additional information. Kate, do you have a question? Looks like you have one. Yes, go right ahead. Unmute yourself, please.
Sorry, I'm so intently listening here. It's just great. Sharon, it's so nice to meet you. I'm Kate and I'm a painter. It's just wonderful to listen to you talk about your paintings though, and to talk about your process and your relationship with the actual shape and the relationship, how you work it up over time. I'm very keen on that myself. I think a lot of us probably have some inkling of that. I'm very interested in your use of color, especially, and also in your conversation about line. Boy, there's so much to talk about. I don't want to be too lengthy about it, but I also kind of wanted to bring it back to the title of your show and thinking about that. And you mentioned John Berger in the beginning, and there's a wonderful film that's produced by Tilda Swinton with John Berger before he passed away, I think in 2019, and it's called Four Seasons in Kinsey and Four Portraits of John Berger. I think you would just love watching that. I put it in the chat just for you to see it, but it's really about life and about looking back and about looking forward at the same time. And so I think it's very interesting what you're talking about with your paintings and how over time your relationship with them seems so stable, and yet things change all the time. And I love being able to be in on that conversation. I think like many of us, we go through that. There is a cycle that we come, and it keeps coming around and around, and it changes a bit every time. Sometimes it can be very disorienting. But I'm just thrilled to talk with you, and the paintings are amazing.
Thank
Yeah, the top of the painting. Well, for one thing, that they're oil paintings. I'm an oil painter as well, but the surfaces, I'm not there. I've been following your work for years, though, so I know the tactileness of the surface. It's really something to do that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kate.
Thank
Are there other thoughts?
Lynn.
Oh, Lynn, go right ahead. Yes. Oh, and then Pat after Lynn. Yes. Great.
Okay.
Sharon, these paintings are so exciting. The energy and the exuberance, it's terrific to hear you talk about them. And one of the things that I've been wondering as you've been talking about previous studios in the city and the way your work changed based on those physical spaces, is there a relationship between these current paintings and your current studio space?
Probably.
Current paintings and current studio space.
I've been here quite a while. I think I moved here about 2006, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've been here quite a while. It's a very small space. I live in a gray cinder block garage cube. It's a cube. Used to be a garage, and it's a square. It's about 30 by 31 feet out on the outside. So I had it completely renovated when I purchased it, so that everything in it is new, everything. And I tried to make as much space as a studio as possible. So I would say I have at least half. Wouldn't you say a studio?
I would say so, yeah.
Half. The rest of it is just bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, and a couch, and the rest is studio. So I
Great
don't know. I'm
arrangement.
so used to this space now. So I don't know. But I suspect if I had a huge space, the work would change a lot, because I always have fantasies of how great it would be to do even bigger paintings, because I could work very big. I love to work big. That's my favorite way to work, is big. I love to use my whole body to work with.
It feels to me like even though these paintings aren't as large as some that you've made, they contain the energy of very large works.
Oh, thanks. That's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And Pat, you had your hand raised. Go ahead and
Yes,
unmute yourself, please. Oh, yeah, great. Mhm.
thank you. Hi, Sharon. I
Okay.
had a question for you,
Yeah.
considering what you said about how things were when you first came, and I'm
Mm.
wondering where you think things are going in the
Oh.
art world.
Oh, God. It's not great. It's not great. Mm-mm. I'm just so happy that I was fortunate enough to live in a time when I could come to New York City and on $300 survive and have a place to have a family and paint. It's outrageous. Uh, and then we continued to live on $50 a week for quite a long time, quite a long. It's not good. I don't think it's a good time to be making art. I don't think it's a good time to be an artist. I really don't.
Agree.
You need a studio. You need a nice, it doesn't have to be nice, but it has to be big. And it makes a huge difference if you have a nice big studio. It really does.
Mhm.
Because I've experienced it. I can feel the difference.
Pat, are you experiencing something similar, like regarding space and where things are headed?
I've just, seen what's happened and here in New York City, and not that I know where things are going, but I'm just hoping for a change.
Well,
Uh,
plus space is so expensive. People don't have studios anymore. I remember when somebody said something like, "Oh, in the future you won't have a studio," and I said, "Oh, we'll always have a studio," because everything was so easy at that time, that early time in the '60s and maybe even the '70s. It was so easy to have a space. We never owned, my husband and I didn't own a space. We would rent a space, but the prices were reasonable. And everybody, all the artists we knew, had wonderful studios. So then the rest of the world caught on to how much fun it was to live in a loft, and then that was the end of it, as we all know. Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Pat. It's a good one. And you're all following along with the news and reading the articles in the Times, but the city at this point, like New York City, don't know, I can't speak to what it is elsewhere, but the city has the equivalent of 26 or more empty Empire State Buildings worth of space at the moment. It's like 40% vacancy rate. I mean, what better opportunity for artists and arts organizations and nonprofits and community service organizations to kind of occupy those spaces and make like a complete about face to the art and culture and I don't know, the rest of it with New York City. But I thought that might happen after the pandemic, but who knows? They're all still sitting empty rather than being rented out to artists. Totally
think
off
it,
topic. Now,
yeah,
Donald, I'm sorry,
I
Pat,
think
go
you're
ahead.
right. I think it still could. It would be great if it did. I mean, my councilwoman, Gail Brewer, she wrote an article, I think it was in the Times and elsewhere, excuse me, that, landlords are hoarding upwards of 100,000 apartments here
Yep.
in the city.
Wow.
Yeah, I read that article as well. Mhm.
That in combination with all the empty space that we see just at ground level in the commercial realm, I mean, I don't see how it's sustainable personally.
Mhm.
It's an excellent point. I'm glad you raised it. Thank you, Pat. Donald, did you have your hand raised? It looked like you leaned in for a second there. No? Okay, good. Pablo, please go ahead.
You're-
Hi, Sharon. Lovely show.
Thank
Congratulations
you.
on. I was curious to hear more about your what you were saying about color when you said that you don't just pick a color, you have to see it inwardly
I have,
and
I have,
receive it. Okay,
I have to receive it.
right.
It has to be sent to me.
Uh-huh. When
And I've tried picking colors, but it
Mhm.
doesn't work. And
Okay.
because I don't feel it, I'm looking at something that's outside of me, and
Well, I'm curious.
that
The,
doesn't work for me. So
the real
I should say.
Well, my curiosity then is that once you have the color transmitted to you, does it link back to associations that you've had in the world? Is it like, oh, that color blue, that's the one I want to use? Or do they feel they just feel sui generis all
I don't
their own?
think I have much association with them. And just maybe in terms of feeling, you know,
Mm,
how that
mm,
feels, how the color feels. For example, when I started these, well, you know that did you? Oh, Matthew, could you show that big green painting?
Sure. Just
That
give me
big
a second.
green painting started. All these started as about this size on the watercolor paper, and was rummaging. I was either painting the color on it, or I was rummaging around, and I have a drawer full of colored paper I haven't used over the decades. It's all decades old. And it's a similar to this green. It was
mm,
it was a kind of a slightly grayed green.
mm.
And I took it out and I thought, oh, that's my next collage painting to do. And I've been since then, since I started working on canvas, I've had to mix that color to get it. I can't find it. I tend to work with flash, acrylic flash, by flash. But if I could find it in golden, I would use golden. But I can't find that exact color, and I have to mix to get that color over and over again. So there's something about that color I really, really like.
Mm.
It's a little military, I think. I don't know. The green. Don't you think it's a little military?
A little bit, but olives, um, you know, I'm in California, so maybe even a little avocado.
Thank you,
There's
Bob.
The
something
outside,
about it I really like.
the outside of an avocado. Yeah.
So I did several. I've done several paintings just using that color. I liked it so much.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Uh,
thank you. That's great.
but no, I don't have
Good.
associations like that. It's more like, how does it work as a painting, or I don't know.
I have a fatigue shirt home from the army when I was in the army. It's that color. Very
Is,
nice.
is it? Yeah, I think it's a little military. I do. Yeah.
Yeah, military, definitely.
Yeah.
But very nice color.
But I just fell in love with the color as soon as I saw this paper. It was that color, and I started using it. Yeah. I like the Naples because Naples yellow is so easy to work with. It's so forgiving. You can do, you can just paint flat, and it's very easy to work with. Some colors give you a lot of trouble. They don't want to be flat, or that they're just
Yeah.
too delicate. I don't know what the problem is, but things start showing up on them. But the Naples yellow, you can just paint any old way you want, and it'll be flat. It'll be.
You want the thin one?
What'd you say?
Pablo, thank you for that question. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all of you again and any hands raised. We have time for one more thought or question. Anyone? Ben, go right ahead.
I was wondering how people view these works and what they might say about them. For me, the line is so strong on the top portion of the painting. I can imagine people viewing the line and projecting what those lines might do, but behind the veil of color, and whether people are able to internalize and that tension between the ones that might seem like they just go around the edge. They could kind of read it a little bit more as maybe the lines might go all the way around beneath the color, or if it's. I was just curious how people might read these. I mean, I'm just seeing them from on the computer, but to me, the tension arises in what the line might be doing behind the veil of color. I know that that might not have been how they were painted, but it
So you
seems
think
like
the
that
color
tension.
behind- You think what do you think is behind the
I
top.
could see, I can envision the line, the top portion of the painting behind the veil of color, behind the color, and so it's kind of hidden, and that tension that whether the viewer might be trying to complete that rest of the painting as though the color wasn't there, like so I could see that tension, whether it's and internalizing the painting by the viewer that's not necessarily there, but might be suggested by the top portion. I don't know. That's just curious if anyone got, was viewing it that same way.
Yeah, Ben, they definitely have I mean, I spent quite a bit of time already with them, and I will spend another several months with these works on the wall. So I'm probably going to see them even more than Sharon.
Yeah.
That's my super selfish. I get to spend time with all the work, Chris, yours included, more than anyone else, Lynn. And I understand what you're saying. It seems like there is like sort of this kind of shifting planes that are happening where the color seems like it's trying to cover up, or the other one's trying to sort of return above and dominate, but they've got this kind of dynamic tension that's going on. It doesn't feel negative. It feels like they're sort of in conversation with each other. It's a very interesting effect, but it feels like one is trying to kind of emerge from the other, which is unusual because there are works that are square format, there's verticals, there's horizontal rectangulars, there's different proportions there, but they have this kind of tension, Sharon, that you've locked into place that I think is really, really amazing. But it's not harsh. It's different. I don't know.
I guess the reason I have gotten more exuberant with the top is that I'm trying to increase the attention, that difference or duality. I'm trying to emphasize the duality between those areas, the top and the bottom area. And we live in duality. Our whole lives are nothing but duality all the time, constant duality. And maybe that's why I'm just having fun with these paintings, because it's a place I can get that out and have fun with it. Do we have a little time left? Are we?
Yeah, if there are other questions, we can go as long as we'd like.
There was another thing I wanted to bring up, and that was a question a friend of mine asked, Karen Shafrano. My friend Linda, who's here on the Zoom, had created a Zoom for a few of us artists, and we were talking one day, and Karen Shafrano said, does anyone ever wish that they could do more of paintings that they did in the past, that they could do more of a particular body of work? And I thought, wow, that's an interesting question. And actually, there's a lot of paintings I wish I could do more of. I would love to do more of them. And then I was thinking, well, why is that? And I guess it's because I love those paintings. But the problem is, I also love the paintings I'm doing right now. And I don't have an assistant. I do everything. I stretch the canvas, I prepare the canvas, I do the paint, I do everything. I don't have any studio assistants. So I'm limited in what I can accomplish with what time I have. And I love what I'm doing when these paintings so much, particularly the top, I love doing the most, that I don't want to give it up to go do something that I did in the past, even though I love a lot of that work that I did in the past. So I realized that the work is really, for me, is about love. I'm loving so much the paintings that I'm doing in the moment that I won't stop to do anything else. And I just wanted to put out there the importance of having that feeling for what you're doing and the importance of it, because I just suspect there's a lot of people, painters, not necessarily painting because they're loving it. I think they might have other motives. And I remember it was my first year in art school, and I already had quite a bit of art because I had a good high school art teacher. But all of a sudden, the first year of art school, I realized that I thought if if I was an artist, I would find out what is the meaning of life. I really had that thought. And I think I still feel like that. I think I discover a lot about life through painting. So I just wanted to say that it's very important what you feel about your paintings. And once I could let go of what I thought I should be painting or whether it fit in and was completely on my own in terms of my own work, the work got better and better and better. And I think it has gotten better and better because I just focus on what I love in the work and I do what I love. Yep. And it's very important.
What a marvelous summary. Thank you, Sharon. You're getting rounds of applause and lots of nods and smiles. So that was a wonderful thing to say. And Karen Schifano's not here with us this evening. So Karen, thank you for the wonderful prompt for that closing statement.
She'll be at the live talk. She said she'd be at the live talk.
Terrific. So that on that note, I would like to thank Sharon for an amazing presentation, great conversation, and thanks to all of you for your questions and thoughts and reflections and your presence here. It is really greatly appreciated. Sharon mentioned a talk, another one. There will be an IRL, in real life talk, on Saturday, let me make sure I got the dates right, Saturday, March 2nd at 3 p.m. So if you can join us, that will take place at the gallery in person. That one will not be recorded because it's too complicated to do that. But if you could come and be there, we will continue this conversation and build upon what we discussed this evening. Now this, again, as I mentioned, a couple people came in late. We recorded tonight. That will be posted on our website by tomorrow. So feel free to watch and share it outward. So that should be up like within 24 hours. And Sharon, of course, as most of you know, lives in Beacon. So she's not in the city, but Sharon, you're going to be at the gallery from time to time on certain dates. And I will put the word out through probably Instagram when you're going to be present. And I'll try to do that a couple of days in advance to give you guys a heads up about when to come down and see Sharon in person. Because that's a great luxury to be in Sharon's presence, of course. Joan, did you want to add something? I saw that you unmuted yourself. Okay, you're good.
No,
Well,
no, I did want to add something.
Oh, Joan, yes, go right ahead.
So I was thinking about when I walked into Sharon's opening, it was a very gray, rainy, snowy day, and it was getting dark really early. And I walked into the gallery and I thought, this is just pure happiness in here. The colors were so exuberant, and I love the connection between the little paintings and the big paintings. They seem to be talking to one another.
We didn't talk about that, but that's a big subject right there. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
It just felt like a really warm, lively, happy place to be.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's so kind. Thank you. And thanks everybody for being here. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Sharon.
All right, and Joan, thank you for that thought as well. I do agree. Yes, I think there's like super energy going on in that space, and it's particularly high contrast with the gray days we've been having and the short ones and the darkness and the cold and the snow. Just to come into the gallery, it's like a burst of energy. So I totally agree with you on that. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. Happy New Year. If it's not too late to say that, wishing you all the best for the year ahead. It's going to be a good year. I'm feeling good. Are we all feeling good? We're feeling optimistic. We have to. Artists is what we do. We specialize in that. Thank you all for joining us, and I will see you at the gallery. Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Matthew.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Stay safe,
Thank
please.
you.
Yeah.
Thank
And thank you,
you.
Sharon.
Donald,
Good night,
Chris,
everybody.
Barbara, Lynn. Good night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, everyone. Thank you.
Hi. Molly, Chris,
Good night,
Joe.
all.
Thanks, John, for coming.